People think family problems begin with shouting, with slammed doors and broken plates and neighbors pressing their ears to thin apartment walls. Mine didn't. Mine began with smiles. Soft voices, careful words, the kind that sound harmless, until you realize they are slowly tightening around your throat. I was sitting at the kitchen table across from my father, when something inside me finally reached its limit. I looked straight at him and said the words I had swallowed for years. If I hear one more sentence from your wife about my money, there won't be any polite conversations left. I will personally explain to her exactly where she stands and why my money is not hers. The room didn't explode. It didn't need to. The refrigerator hummed quietly in the background. My stepmother's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth, frozen in the air. My father stared at me like he was seeing a stranger wearing his daughter's face. That was the moment everything shifted. Growing up, I believed families only broke loudly. I thought it happened in chaos, screaming matches, doors slamming, voices cracking with rage. I didn't know they could fall apart slowly, quietly, one polite smile at a time. One gentle comment placed carefully under the table like a hidden blade. My mother died when I was 15. Cancer. Fast. Cruel. Unfair. One summer she complained about a small ache in her side. By winter, I was standing over her grave in borrowed black shoes that pinched my feet while adults told me how strong I was. I hated that word. Strong meant you weren't allowed to cry too much. It meant you weren't allowed to collapse. It meant you had to nod and thank people while your world was still burning. My father waited less than a year before introducing Linda. She wasn't openly cruel. That was the danger. She smiled too easily, spoke gently, touched my arm when she talked, like we already shared something special. She brought food to neighbors, wine to dinners, and kindness that looked real enough for everyone else. People adored her. They told my father how lucky he was to find happiness. Again, I was 17. Old enough to understand something felt wrong. Young enough to stay silent. 2 years later, I left for basic training. My father hugged me tightly and said he was proud. Linda cried just enough to look loving without smudging her makeup. We'll take care of everything here, she said softly. You just focus on your future. I believed her, or maybe I needed to. The military changed me. It taught me patience, discipline, how to stay quiet, how to observe, how to wait. I didn't know it yet, but those lessons would protect me later. The first comment about my money came during my second year of service. We were on a video call. Linda sat beside my father, her hand resting lightly on his knee, as if she needed the world to remember where she belonged. You must be doing well now, she said sweetly. With your pay, your housing allowance, all those bonuses. I manage, I replied. Well, she continued smiling, it's good to know the family has security. I didn't like how she said family. After that, the comments didn't stop. They were always gentle, always polite. Have you thought about long-term planning? Wouldn't it be easier if your father helped manage things? You're so young. Money can be confusing. Every time. My father would nod quietly and avoid my eyes. When I came home on leave, I noticed things were different. My mother's desk was gone. In its place sat a modern glass table. Linda said it made the room feel cleaner. The filing cabinet where my mom kept everything, insurance papers, letters, birthday cards, had vanished too. Oh, those old things, Linda said lightly. We organized them. You don't need to worry. I started worrying immediately. One night after dinner, she served dessert and said casually, we should talk about consolidating accounts. It just makes sense for families. I set my fork down. My accounts are fine. She smiled like nothing mattered. Of course, just a thought. That night I lay awake in my childhood bed staring at the pale square on the wall where my mother's calendar used to hang. I felt like a visitor in my own past. The breaking point didn't come with shouting. It came with an email, a bank alert, security notice, attempted access, wrong verification. My hands went cold. No one had my information. When I called the bank, they asked if I had authorized anyone to manage my finances. I hadn't. They mentioned an inquiry connected to my father's Address. Something inside me hardened. 2 weeks later I came home. I didn't accuse anyone. I watched. Linda talked constantly about bills, investments, how expensive the house was, how tired my father must be after everything he'd endured. Then she said it. Well, your money is really part of this household anyway. I looked at my father. He said nothing. That's when I stood up and spoke. Calm, clear, controlled. If I hear one more sentence from your wife about my money, I told him there will be no more polite conversations. I will explain exactly where she stands and why my money is not hers. Do you understand? Linda's smile vanished. My father went pale. He nodded. But understanding isn't respect. And I was tired of asking for respect. Things didn't change. They shifted. Linda became quieter. Smarter. She stopped mentioning money directly. Instead, she talked about stress, responsibility, how hard it was holding things together while I was gone. She never asked. She didn't have to. My father shrank. I saw it in how he checked her face before answering questions, how he changed sentences halfway through when she moved. Control isn't always loud. Sometimes it's trained. The next test came at a family dinner. Too much food, too much wine, too many fake smiles. Linda laughed and said to my aunt, with her military income, we're very lucky. I froze. I looked at my father. He laughed. She's doing well. That was the crack. Later, in the hallway, I told him she crossed a line. She was just talking, he said. You're making excuses, I replied. He sighed. You don't understand how complicated things are. That told me everything. Another bank alert came days later. Someone asking about authorized users. I said nothing. I documented everything. Linda grew bolder. She joked. Careful. She might cut us off. She laughed. One night, she handed my father papers. My bank's logo was on top. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I ran. Cold air burned my lungs. My thoughts sharpened. Linda wanted control, and my father was letting her take it. That morning, she smiled like nothing was wrong. You've been quiet, she said. I've been listening. I called legal assistance. They asked one question. Did you authorize this? No. Then you're right to be concerned. Not dramatic. Not paranoid. Right. Night. Linda tried again. This is for family, she said, touching my arm. My money isn't. I replied. Her hand fell. She understood then. I was no longer manageable. And that frightened her. Because people like Linda don't fear confrontation. They fear losing leverage. I didn't uncover the truth all at once. It came in fragments. Small ordinary things fatally became dangerous when you put them together. The first was a letter that wasn't meant for me. It arrived while I was back on base, forwarded from my father's address. The envelope had been opened, resealed sloppily, then dropped into the outgoing mail pile like an afterthought. Inside was a notice from a credit card company thanking my father for his recent inquiry regarding balance transfers and authorized users. The name on the account wasn't his. It was mine. I sat on the edge of my bunk, the paper shaking slightly in my hands, and felt that cold, unmistakable sensation crawl up my spine. Not fear, recognition. The kind you get when something you suspected finally steps into the light and looks you straight in the face. I called the number on the letter immediately. The representative was calm, professional, and careful with her words. She confirmed what I already knew. Someone using my personal information had requested account access options. Not successfully, not yet, but deliberately. Is there a reason someone would think they're allowed to do that? She asked. I thought of Linda's hand on my arm. My father's silence. The word family used like a key. No, I said, there isn't. I locked down everything that same afternoon. New passwords, new security questions, verbal passcodes. I flagged my accounts for heightened monitoring. The woman on the line walked me through each step, her voice steady and reassuring. You did the right thing by calling early, she said before hanging up. Early. That word lingered because it meant something worse could have happened if I hadn't. The next piece fell into place during my next visit home. I was looking for an old notebook, one my mother used to keep lists and nothing important, just something that made the house feel less unfamiliar. I checked the hall closet. then the drawer beneath the phone. Finally, I opened the small cabinet in study. That was where I found the folder. It wasn't hidden, that was the mistake. It sat on the middle shelf, tucked between household manuals and tax returns, labeled in neat handwriting plain. Inside were printed emails, budget drafts, loan projections, a list of assets, my assets. My name appeared again and again, typed cleanly at the top of pages I had never seen before. Notes in the margins referenced temporary transfers, family use, eventual. Consolidation. My throat went dry. I stood there, folder open, listening to the sound of Linda moving around the kitchen. Plates clinking, water running, the ordinary soundtrack of a home that no longer felt like one. One page stopped me cold. A handwritten note folded and tucked behind a spreadsheet. She won't say no forever, it read. Once she understands responsibility, she see it's better this way. There was no signature. There didn't need to be. I closed the folder carefully, slid it back into place, and walked out of the study without making a sound. My hands were steady, my heart wasn't. At dinner that night, Linda talked about rising costs, inflation, how unpredictable the future was. She spoke with the practiced cadence of someone laying groundwork, not asking permission. My father nodded along. I watched them both, thinking of all the years I had defended his quietness. His skinness, of how often I'd told myself he was just tired, just grieving, just trying to keep peace. Peace, I realized, was expensive. And I was the one being asked to pay for it. Later that evening, my father knocked on my door.
He stood there awkwardly, hands in his pockets, eyes tired.
Your stepmother mentioned you seemed distant, he said. I didn't invite him in. I found the folder, I replied. He stiffened. You went through our things. I recognized my own name. I stayed on plans I didn't make. He exhaled slowly. She was just thinking ahead. For one, she worries about the house, about us, and what about me? He looked away. That was my answer. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and let myself feel it. Not rage, not grief, but fatal ache of clarity. The understanding that my father wasn't being manipulated. He was participating. The next morning, I called the fraud department. This time, I didn't speak in hypotheticals. I described the letters, the inquiries, the documents, the handwritten note, the address. The tone on the other end shifted immediately. Do not confront them, the agent said. Continue documenting. We'll open a file. A file. It sounded so small, so official, but it carried weight. By the time I returned to base, I had a system. I scanned every document I found. I photographed dendrite notes. I saved emails and logged conversations, dates, times, exact phrasing. I kept copies in 2 secure locations. I learned the laws that applied to my accounts, my state, my situation. The military had taught me to plan for contingencies. So, I did. Linda noticed the change before my father did. You've been very busy, she said during a phone call, her voice light. You barely tell us anything anymore. I'm focused, I replied. That's good, she said. We all have to do our part. I almost laughed. Instead, I ended the call and added her words to my log. The final piece came unexpectedly. An email from a loan officer mistakenly sent to me instead of my father. A simple apology followed by an attachment. A draft application collateral listed expected future income. Mine. That was when I knew. This wasn't overreach. It was net misdirstinct. It was a strategy. And strategies could be dismantled. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay awake listening to the familiar sounds of the barracks, the rhythm of breathing around me, the hum of fluorescent lights. I thought about my mother, how careful she'd been, how she labeled everything, how she used to say that preparation was a form of love. I finally understood what she meant. By morning, the grief had sharpened into resolve. They thought my silence meant permission. They thought my distance meant ignorance. They were wrong. And soon they were going to learn exactly how wrong. I didn't change my behavior right away. That would have been too obvious. People who assume control panic when they sense resistance. And panic makes them sloppy, but only if you let them feel safe first. So I stayed polite. I answered Linda's calls. I responded to my father's messages. I smiled during video chats and talked about work without sharing details. I asked about the house, about their health, about things that made me sound engaged, but revealed nothing. Inside, I was building something precise. Every morning before duty, I reviewed my notes, dates, times, statements. The language Linda used when she thought she was being subtle, the moments my father deferred instead of intervening. I treated it the way I'd been trained to treat intelligence. Verify, corroborate, document. Emotion was useless here. Structure wasn't. I opened a new account at a different bank, one my family had never used. I redirected my deposits. I placed alerts on every existing account. I froze my credit. When the confirmation emails arrived, I archived them in a folder labeled Simply Evidence. I consulted legal assistance on, this time with specifics, names, documents, screenshots. The officer didn't interrupt. When I finished, Helen back in his chair and folded his hands. "This isn't a misunderstanding," he said calmly. "This is financial exploitation." Hearing it said out loud did something to me. It stripped the last layer off doubt. This wasn't family tension. It was misconduct. "What are my options?" I asked. He outlined them clearly. Civil remedies, protective measures, criminal escalation if necessary.
He emphasized choice, control.
"You decide how far this goes," he said. That night I called the bank again. Not the general line, but the fraud unit handling my case. I asked questions. I learned procedures. I learned timelines.
He learned exactly.
What kind of documentation carried weight and what kind got ignored. Linda sent me a message while I was on the call. "Just checking in. Your dad's been stressed. We're all worried about you." I saved it. The next step was the hardest. I had to let them think it was working. I mentioned casually that managing everything alone was tiring. I said I was overwhelmed. I let Linda hear uncertainty in my voice for the first time. She leaned in immediately. "You don't have to do this by yourself," she said gently. "Families share burdens." "No," I replied. "I just don't know where to start." Her voice warmed. "Your father can help. We both can." That was the moment I knew she believed she'd won. Over the next few weeks, she pushed carefully. A suggestion here, a form there, a comment about how much easier it would be if things were centralized. She framed it as support, but Thepperpork told a different story. Each attempt went into my file. My father avoided my eyes whenever the topic came up. He never stopped her. That silence became its own record. I started rehearsing the conversation. I knew what was coming, not emotionally, but strategically. What I would say, what I wouldn't, where I would pause, where I would let silence do the work. I perceived setting deliberately. A family dinner, neutral ground, witnesses close enough to matter, but not enough to turn it into theater. I didn't want spectacle. I wanted clarity. When the evening arrived, Linda was radiant. She always was when she felt in control. She talked about the future, about stability, about how proud she was of our girl. Halfway through dessert, she brought it up. "We've been thinking," she said, glancing at my father. "Maybe it's time to formalize some things." "Is it my spoon down?" "What things?" I asked. She smiled. "Just safeguards in case anything happens." To whom I asked. She hesitated just for a moment. "To all office?" I nodded slowly. "I've already safeguarded my accounts." Her smile faltered. "Oh yes," I said, "and I've spoken to my bank and legal assistants." The table went quiet. My father's face drained of color. Linda's eyes sharpened. "Why would you do that?" She asked, her tone light but strained. "Because someone tried." "To access my finances without my authorization," I said evenly. She laughed softly. "That sounds dramatic." "It's documented," I replied. Silence. "I warned you." I continued, turning to my father. "I set a boundary." He swallowed. "We were just trying to help." "You were trying to decide for me," I said. "There's a difference." Linda leaned back in her chair, her expression cooling. "You're overreacting." "No," I said, "I'm prepared." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't threaten. I simply let them understand that the version of me who stayed quiet was gone. After dinner, Linda tried to corner me in the kitchen. "You're making this into something ugly," she said sharply. "It already was," I replied. It just stopped pretending it wasn't. She stared at me, calculating. You think you have power here? I know I do, I said. That was the first time she looked afraid because she understood. Then what my father hadn't, that I wasn't bluffing again, I wasn't emotional. I was methodical, and methodical people don't stop on set they start. The dinner was Linda's idea. She framed it as a gesture of reconciliation, which should have been my first clue. People who wrong you don't usually seek peace unless they're trying to regain ground. She suggested inviting Gexton family and aunt. I barely spoke to a cousin who always asked invasive questions. A few family friends who remembered me as a quiet kid and still spoke to me like one. It'll be nice, Linda said on the phone. A chance to reconnect. We're all under so much stress lately. Stress. Another word she used when she meant leverage. I agreed immediately. That surprised her. I could hear it in the pause before she responded the moment she recalibrated. Good, she said. I'll make your favorite. I didn't correct her. She never remembered what that was. The evening arrived crisp and cool, the kind of fall night that made the house smell like roasted vegetables and cinnamon. Linda had set the table. Carefully, candle spaced, just so her good china laid out like a stage. She wore a cream-colored sweater that made her look soft and approachable. My father hovered near the sink, drying the same glass over and over. The guests arrived in clusters, coats and chatter filling the hallway. Hugs were exchanged, compliments offered. Someone mentioned how proud they were of me serving my country. Linda took that opening. She's doing very well, she said brightly. We're so grateful. Not many families have that kind of security. There it was again. I caught my father's eye. He looked away. Dinner unfolded slowly. Stories, laughter, the clink of silverware. Linda steered conversations effortlessly, always circling back to responsibility. To planning to how important it was to think ahead. I waited. It came during dessert. So my aunt said, smiling at me, Do you plan to stay in the military long term? Maybe, I replied. I like what I do. Linda nodded. And with that kind of income, she has so many options. I set my fork down. What kind of options? I asked. She blinked. Well, investing, helping family, making sure everyone's taken care of. The table grew quiet, not tense, curious. I reached into my bag and placed a slim envelope on the table between us. Linda's eyes dropped to it immediately. What's that? She asked. A summary, I said, of recent activity connected to my finances. My father stiffened. Linda laughed lightly. Is this really the time? I think it's the perfect time, I replied. I didn't open the envelope. I didn't slide papers across the table. I let it sit there, closed its presence heavier than anything inside it. I've been contacted by my bank, I continued calmly. There have been multiple attempts to access my accounts, requests for information, draft applications, none of them authorized. The room went very still. My aunt looked between us, uncertain. Someone cleared their throat. That sounds like a mistake. Linda said quickly, banks get things wrong all the time. Not like this, I said. Not repeatedly. My father finally spoke. We can talk about this later. I'm comfortable talking about it now, I said, since it's already been discussed publicly. Linda's jaw tightened. I've opened a file, I continued, with the fraud department, and I've consulted legal assistance. There it was, the shift, the moment when the air changed. Linda's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. She took a sip, then another, her smile now rigid. This ice is necessary, she said. We're family. That's exactly why it matters, I replied. No one spoke. The candles flickered. I turned to my father. I warned you. I set a boundary. It was crossed. He stared down at his plate. I'm not accusing anyone tonight, I said. I'm informing you. There will be a meeting soon with professionals. We'll discuss what happens next. Linda leaned back in her chair, her composure cracking just enough to reveal the calculation beneath. You're threatening us. No, I said, I'm giving you clarity. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze. Conversations restarted forced and awkward. People avoided my eyes. When guests finally began to leave, Linda hugged them tightly, her smile never wavering. To anyone watching, it looked like a successful evening. After the last car pulled away, Linda turned on me. You humiliated me, she hissed. He told the truth, I replied. You did this on purpose, yes. My father stood between us, his shoulders slumped. Can we just calm down? I am calm, I said. That's the point. Linda laughed sharp and brittle. You think you've won something? I think you understand now, I said. And that's enough for tonight. She stared at the envelope still, sitting on the table. What's in it? You'll see, I said at the meeting. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. That night I slept better than I had in months. Because the thing about leverage is this, once it's exposed, it stops working. And Linda knew it. The meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock on a Tuesday. Not at the house, not at a cafe. Neutral ground, an office with glass walls and neutral art. Second of place designed to keep emotions from staining the furniture. I chose it deliberately. Emotions blur edges. Pepper sharpens them. My father arrived first. He looked older than he had a week earlier. His shoulders were hunched. His tie knotted too tightly, as if he'd pulled it that way to remind himself he was still in control of something. He nodded at me when I entered the gesture, stiff and uncertain. Linda arrived 3 minutes late. She wore a dark blazer and heels that clicked sharply against the floor each step, announcing her presence like she still believed this was a stage she could command. She smiled at the receptionist at the front certificates on the wall at everyone. Except me. We sat. The mediator introduced herself, then the attorney retained quiet, precise, a woman who spoke only when necessary. I noticed Linda watching her hands instead of her fists. That told me something. Let's begin, the mediator said. I didn't speak first. Linda did. This is all very dramatic, she said lightly. We're here because of a misunderstanding. My attorney slid a folder across the table. It's documented, she said. Linda's smile tightened. The mediator cleared her throat. Perhaps we should start with the facts. So we did. Timeline, dates, attempted access, unauthorized inquiries, draft applications, the handwritten note. The collateral. Listing expected future income mine. Each item was presented clearly, methodically, no accusations, no raised voices. Just facts. My father stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Linda shifted in her chair, crossing and uncrossing her legs. This doesn't prevent it, she said. People plan. Families plan for other people's money, my attorney asked. Silence. The mediator turned to me. What outcome are you seeking? I took a breath. I had rehearsed this, not the words, but the steadiness. First, I said a formal acknowledgement that my finances are mine alone. No shared access, no inquiries, no future planning without Meriton. Consent. Linda opened her mouth, closed it. Second, I continued a sign statement confirming that any prior attempts to access or leverage my accounts were unauthorized. My father flinched. Third, I said a commitment that my name, income, and expected future earnings will not be used in any financial discussions, applications, or representations going forward. Linda leaned forward. And if we didn't agree, I met her eyes. Then the fraud. File moves forward. The room went very quiet. My father finally spoke. You'd do that to us. I looked at him. I already did it to protect myself. He rubbed his face with both hands. We were just trying to make things easier. For one, I asked. He didn't answer. The mediator interjected gently. There are alternatives to escalation, settlement, boundaries. That's what I'm offering, I said. Linda laughed softly. You're enjoying this? No, I replied. I'm ending it. She turned to my father. You're going to let her do this? He hesitated. That hesitation, the space where he should have defended me years ago, was all the confirmation I needed. My attorney placed another document on the table. This outlines the terms, she said. If signed, no further action will be taken. Linda scanned the page quickly. Her face changed as she read. This limits us, she said sharply. It protects me, I replied. And what about family? She demanded. Family doesn't require access to my accounts, I said. She looked at my father again. Say something. He swallowed. Linda, maybe we should just sign. her head snapped toward him. After everything I've done for you. The mediator raised a hand. Let's keep this productive. Linda leaned back, her composure cracking. You're choosing her over me. My father stared at the table. I'm choosing to stop this from getting worse. She laughed, then bit her sharp. You always do this. Your treat. I watched them detached as if observing a pattern finally visible from the outside. I'm not asking you to choose sides, I said. I'm drawing a line. The mediator slid the pen across the table. Linda didn't reach for it. My father did. Wait, she said. If we sign this, what happens? The matter ends here, my attorney replied. Providence there are no further violations. Linda's fingers curled into her palm. And if we don't, then the documentation is forwarded. I said today. She looked at me. Really? Looked at me for the first time without calculation. You think you're so disciplined? She said quietly. So controlled. I am, I replied. That's why this works. Shadowed away, jaw tight. My father signed first. The sound of the pen on paper was louder than I expected. Linda stared at the document for a long moment, then snatched the pen and signed with a sharp, angry stroke. The mediator collected the papers. Thank you, she said. We'll finalize this. As Westwood, my father lingered. Can we talk? He asked me quietly. I shook my head. Not today. Linda walked past us without a word, her heels echoing down the hallway. Each step heavy with something like defeat. Outside, the air was cool and clear. I took a breath and felt something loosen inside me. Not relief exactly, but completion. I hadn't won. I had concluded, and sometimes that was better. The silence afterward was unfamiliar. Not the awkward kind that followed arguments or the brittle quiet that settled over a room when Sumia nervous to apologize. This was different. It was clean, unoccupied, like a space that had finally been cleared of furniture you never chose in the first place. I returned to base 2 days later. The drive was long, stretching through flat highways and early morning fog. I kept the radio off. I wanted to hear my own thoughts to test how they sounded now that I wasn't constantly defending Miss inside my head. They were quieter. My father sent one message that week. Just a few words. I hope you're okay. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry. Anger would have required energy I no longer wanted to give. But because the message was incomplete, hope without. Accountability was just another form of avoidance. I had spent years filling in gaps for him. I was done doing that. Linda didn't reach out at all. I learned later through a relative who still thought updates were helpful, that she was telling people I'd become cold, that the military had changed me, that I'd turned money into something ugly. I let her have that story. People like Linda needed narratives. They needed to be wronged, misunderstood, diminished by forces beyond their control. I didn't need to correct her. Anyone who mattered had already seen enough. What surprised me most was how little I missed the house. I'd expected grief, nostalgia, a sense of loss for the place where I'd grown up. But when I thought about it, the house I missed hadn't existed for a long time, not since my mother died. Everything after that had been a version edited by someone else. On my first free weekend back, I drove to the cemetery. It was quiet, the grass trimmed neatly, the headstones catching the afternoon light. I brought nothing with me, no flowers, no prepared words. I didn't need them. I stood in front of my mother's grave and told her the truth. I handled it, I said softly. I didn't let them take what wasn't theirs. I thought about the girl I'd been. When she died, how desperate I'd been to keep things together. How willing I'd been to disappear to make space for other people's comfort. I wished I could tell her that it hadn't been weakness, just youth, just love misdirected. I learned how to say no, I said, and how to mean it. The wind moved through the trees, gentle and steady. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for permission to breathe. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Finances stayed exactly where they belonged. My name stayed off everything that wasn't mine. The fraud file was closed, marked resolved. The folder labeled evidence went into storage untouched, but available. Not a threat, just a reminder. My father tried. Once more a few months later. A voicemail this time. You sounded tired, older. It should have protected you, he said. I didn't, I'm sorry. I listened to it twice. Then I archived it. Apologies didn't rebuild trust. They acknowledged damage after it was done. I wasn't cruel enough to deny him the chance to reflect, but I wasn't obligated to resume a relationship just because Heffinally understood the cost of his silence. Some lessons arrived late. That didn't make them my responsibility. The military gave me structure. My mother gave me values. And this experience, unwanted, exhausting, necessary, gave me something else entirely. Boundaries. Not walls, not punishments. Just clear lines drawn with intention. I didn't walk away with satisfaction. There was no victory lap, no dramatic sense of triumph. What I gained was quieter than that. I gained ownership of my life. I gained the understanding that respect didn't require permission, and that being difficult was sometimes just another word for being unwilling to be used. Most of all, I learned that family wasn't defined by access. It was defined by care, and care. Real care never needed to be extracted. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to draw a line where one didn't exist before, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from or what part of this story stayed with you. We share stories like this every day. Stories about boundaries, resilience, and finding your footing again. If you don't want to miss the next one, subscribe and stay with us. Let's keep walking this path together. All.